Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? And you thought the season was over. Ha! Saints season did end, but silly season is just beginning now as the Saints embark on a coaching search for the second time in 3 years now. Dennis Allen out. Darren Rizzi will interview for the job, but my goodness, the reports are flying fast and furious on this Black Monday around the NFL. Ross Jackson, LouisianaSports.net. He's our Saints guy. He's been all over it today. He joins us now. How are you, man?
Hey, buddy, doing great. Yeah, it's a whole other season all of a sudden.
Man, and I seem like every time I refresh Twitter or the website or our LouisianaSports.net text chain, you've got another name. I think, let me start with a big picture question, then we'll go into some nuance about each candidate. What can you tell us about the process as a whole as far as how this is likely to play out over the next days, weeks, et cetera?
Yeah, so what I would expect is, and the first thing that I'll say is that do not expect a head coach to be named very quickly. And that's just not really just a New Orleans Saints thing. That's going to kind of be around the NFL. There's a couple of different dominoes that you're looking at falling, and there's only so much you can do in terms of the NFL schedule, in terms of when it allows you to interview coordinators or people that are already on working with other teams that are in the playoffs. And, of course, those are going to be amongst the most desirable names because, well, they're in the playoffs and they're with good teams. And they're good coordinators. And so that's typically the way this is going to work out. So what you should expect is to continue to see these requests for interviews over the course of the next few days, throughout this week, next week, getting into the 13th of the month. You can do some virtual interviews with guys that are coaching in those playoffs. And then after that, it's going to kind of go radio silent in terms of some of those guys up until the 19th and until those teams are eliminated. So there's going to be a little bit of a gap of a week in the midst of all that. I would also expect...
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were done.
Yep. I would also expect that when it comes to Darren Rizzi, who will be an internal candidate, that very likely they'll have an interview with him over the course of the next week. Another guy, Mike Vrabel, who can be who could be interviewed immediately, but that you're still looking at them, the Saints, spending this next week, reevaluating the team, evaluating their staff, and figuring things out. Darren Rizzi will still be a part of that. That's going to be a key cog in the wheel in terms of the mechanism of hiring this next head coach, is to understand where they are and what things need to change. And so that will be a part of that timeline as well, is that evaluation period over the course of this week.
So I guess just to clear the deck, do we think there's any chance that Darren Rizzi gets the job?
I would certainly say that there's a chance. I don't know how likely it is. I don't know that he would necessarily be entering as the favorite. But if you look at the jobs that are available, and some of the guys that we already know are amongst the top of the list for New Orleans, Mike Vrabel feels like a really good fit for a team like the New England Patriots, who kind of surprised everybody by opening up a head coaching search this weekend. A guy like Aaron Glenn, who's way on top of the list for New Orleans, we're sure is a guy that could also be looking at that New York Jets job as a guy that was drafted by the New York Jets, number 12 overall, as he came into the league. And so if you start to see some of those top candidates go away, then all of a sudden, like, Darren Rizzi just keeps moving up the list. And I'll be honest, I don't think that you have to go very far down the list to find Darren Rizzi's name in the first place. And so I don't think that it would take that many coordinators, former coordinators, or former head coaches to get hired away elsewhere in order for Darren Rizzi to reach the top of that list. So I wouldn't close the door on that just yet. Especially if the Saints are going to kind of incrementally rebuild this team over the course of the next few years, where they could probably enter the coaching search again in a couple years if they needed to, or find success with him. He's a guy that they could feel comfortable with. So I wouldn't rule him out, but I think that there are still going to be some names up above.
Ross, there's 5 jobs open. When you look at salary cap, quarterback situation, cap situation, roster situation, it's not even debatable the Saints is the worst job open. Like, we don't need to go, like, we can universally agree that of the 5, this is the 5th. Make the case for why the Saints, even though it's the 5th of the 5, make the case for why this would be appealing for a candidate.
Yeah, it's all relative, right? You can be the 5th of 5 championship winners and still be a championship winner. So
yes.
It is a relative thing. So I think that when you look at New Orleans, one of the big things is patience, and I think that you're going to find that New Orleans Saints, to a fault, have shown that they will be patient, and so I think that that's something that operates pretty well for guys that are entering this head coaching search who are either first-time head coaches or coaches that couldn't make it happen somewhere else, which is going to be about 100% of the coaches that they interview. It's going to be one of those two categories. That's what happens during these coaching searches. And so I think that the patience of the organization and the fact that their salary cap is kind of in the situation that it's in, $63 million over going into next year, that you're basically going to get a built-in free year to where, you're looking at that as a part of what you're doing, not where you could end up in a New England Patriots, Gerard Mayo type situation to where you get 1 year and then you're done. So I think that that's one of the biggest selling points. I think the other biggest selling point is, and I know that a lot of fans aren't going to like hearing this, but the New Orleans Saints have stable ownership. They have a stable general manager. Now, is that general manager going to make the right decisions? He is going to be evaluated over the course of this offseason as well. It's one of the reasons why he's going to be a big part and outside of his job description, be a guy that's going to be at the top of the list in terms of this coaching search, is because he gets evaluated in the midst of all this as well. But look, the Saints aren't in a situation where they have a bunch of turmoil and turnover and things like that, like other franchises. Young coaches that couldn't make it work elsewhere, they want to see that. They want to be a part of that. And I think the last thing is, this is a team that's looking to rebuild and that is looking to overhaul over the course of the next few years, no matter how much they tell you that they're not. That's the goal, is to get better. And in order to do that, you're going to be making personnel decisions. So you have a real opportunity here as a new head coach coming into this situation where you have good salary cap outlook in the future within the next couple of years. And so then you're looking at the opportunity to be able to rebuild this franchise rebuild this team exactly the way that you want to see it rebuilt.
I just saw this too. Josina Anderson, it's funny how quickly this goes, Ross.
Yep.
I was just going to ask you about the candidates that the Saints have requested. You've already reported Joe Brady, Kellen Moore. Well, Josina Anderson just tweeted, the Saints have requested permission for Giants assistant head coach and offensive coordinator Mike Kafka.
Yep.
So by the way, as soon as we're done, you can go write that one.
I'm on it.
I'm sure you are. Actually, we should hang up now so you can go write it for Louisiana Sports. But let's go through the candidates that we know the Saints have reported requested. So let's start with Joe Brady and Kellen Moore. Maybe just tell me your reaction, why you think it might make sense.
Yeah, those are guys that fit the trend of the NFL, which is to go and hire the big, young, bright offensive minds. Joe Brady, of course, was with the team before 2017, 2018, as an offensive assistant before, of course, heading over to LSU and winning a national championship there in 2019. And he has sort of the offensive wonder kid type of a label. And, of course, has seen a lot of success with the Buffalo Bills. So I think that he's the guy that could make sense for New Orleans. Kellen Moore is an interesting one because he shows the team going away from its kind of comfort zone. He's not really anybody that's been super connected with New Orleans outside of Derek Foster, their running backs coach. They were together last year with the Los Angeles Chargers. And so, or in recent years with Los Angeles Chargers, but same thing, right? 36-year-old guy, young wonder kid type, has worked with some great quarterbacks, all that. I think those are two guys that just kind of fit the trend of what the NFL is looking for in those young offensive minds.
Do you have any thought on Kafka? I know that's brand new, but any thought there?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy whose name has been around for quite a while. I mean, he ended up getting some of those, interviews in the recent past with other teams. He's been a name that is continuously kind of filtered in and out. And I think that one of the reasons why is that he is, he's got the former player, he's got the quarterback experience, all those other things. He's also not only been with the New York Giants, but in the recent past, he was the quarterback coach for Patrick Mahomes. He was the passing game coordinator, I believe, for that team too, and a couple of electrifying years in 2020 and 2021. So I think that those were things that made him a candidate in New York as an offensive coordinator. And then now he's been in New York. I'm sure he's learned some lessons of what not to do while there, and it makes him a pretty solid candidate going into future head coaching searches as well. I think that he's a guy that also, if I'm not mistaken, kind of checks the Parcells tree box. He has the Andy Reid connection there too, and has been a part of a big market. And so I think all those things make him a guy that teams are going to want to talk to over the course of this offseason.
He's Ross Jackson, LouisianaSports.net. Of course, Locked on Saints podcast as well. Get him on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Okay, let's talk about some of the rumors that we've heard. Over the weekend, the John Gruden thing was thrown out there. How much validity do you think there is to the John Gruden talk?
I think there's validity that he's going to get looks. It's going to be one of those things where, like, one team jumps the shark and says, yeah, okay, we'll do it. We'll interview John Gruden. And then because the one team did it, every other team goes, okay, it's okay to do it now. And then they'll all go out and do it. I expect that will be the case. I think he'll get a flurry of those phone calls. And so we'll see exactly which way it all goes for him. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe his re-entrance to the NFL isn't immediately back as a head coach. That would be out of the ordinary, regardless of any means of dismissal and leaving and resignation and all these other things. Obviously, like the emails are a huge part. There's a lot of baggage when it comes to that. I think, though, that where the Saints kind of probably aren't a good fit for him is that they're a team that's kind of already in a little bit of turmoil, right? Like a lot of changeover coming for this team. Are they really in the position to be able to absorb all of that controversy, all of that baggage? I don't know that they are. But I do think that there's validity in that teams don't mind rolling the dice on a guy like John Gruden if other teams also aren't worried about rolling the dice on John Gruden. So we'll see where it goes, but I think it'll be a floodgate situation.
The other one that was sort of rumored here is David Shaw, the former Stanford head coach. This was interesting. So James Slater of NFL Media, who's certainly reputable, cited two sources that the Saints were going to interview David Shaw. Nick Underhill, who also, of course, is very reputable, reported that the Saints wouldn't, in turn, interview David Shaw. What can you tell us, Ross, and then what would be your reaction to Shaw as a potential candidate?
Yeah, I think Shaw as a potential candidate is a good candidate. I think he's a solid candidate. I wouldn't be surprised if he turns out to be one for some team and everything like that, New Orleans Saints included. It could be a situation to where, one report came from the intent to interview, while another report comes from, hey, that's not necessarily happening right now, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen down the road. Like there's a bunch of reasons why these types of things can conflict. But I think that when you look at what it is that a guy like David Shaw brings you is again his experience with quarterbacks, his experience as an offensive mind. He's worked with guys like Andrew Luck, who is one of the greatest quarterback prospects coming into the NFL at any point, and then now has experience with Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. Like there's some connective tissue there all of a sudden. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an interview potentially happen or there to be some interest. I think as a candidate, he's a solid candidate. I don't know that this is his cycle to actually get a job, but sometimes this is also about get him in, have the interview, keep tabs on him for maybe something else or a future need at a later time, and at least opening up his opportunities within the NFL.
A couple more quickly. He's on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola, LouisianaSports.net, Locked On Saints podcast. If you're not listening to Ross every day, why not? If you're not reading him every day, why not? This is like the best time. This is, with the season being what it was, this is the time when things are actually really interesting right now. Okay, you mentioned Aaron Glenn early in this conversation. I guess two-parter, why does Glenn make sense? And then the other part is, why would Glenn, who is going to be very desirable, want New Orleans?
Yeah, man, that's going to be a really interesting one to watch because, like I said earlier, I really think that Aaron Glenn is going to be. I wouldn't blame him for being very tempted and intrigued by that New York Jets job either. It's not every day you get to be a guy that could potentially be a head coach of the New York Jets for all their ineptitude as of late. It's still a very historied franchise. And so I think the thing that you look at in terms of looking back at why would Aaron Glenn want New Orleans, knowing that the Jets are available, is like, look, that's not going to be that's tough competition for New Orleans. But I think that for Glenn, maybe the thing is the connective tissue that he already has here. Of course, he was a defensive backs coach, finished his career as a player here in 2008. And again, you're looking at a team that would be able to provide him as a first-time head coach a lot of patience and a lot of time to build what it is that he wants. And a lot of the things that he wants to do on defense, a lot of the players and personnel-wise on the roster here already know what that is and how to do it. Not a lot of translation, all those other things. He would have leaders probably for another year, some collection of guys like DeMario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu and Cam Jordan, whoever makes it to 2025. Those guys would be able to kind of help to translate his system to guys because they would already have the experience, yada, yada. So I think that there's just the symmetry there makes it an easier transition and then a patient transition. But I think he's going to be really tempted by what the Jets have to offer.
Is there any name we haven't talked about yet that's worth mentioning as of now?
Well, certainly we should talk about Matt Nagy, shouldn't we?
Oh, God, I did forget about that was you want to talk about a Freudian slip? Like, just omitting Matt Nagy from this conversation unintentionally says everything that needs to be said, right? Okay, Matt Nagy, give me 30, or well, you can take 60 if you need it, but hopefully no more than that.
I won't need 60.
Okay.
I think that you look at Matt Nagy as like a Mike Vrabel light. Somebody that you bring in to be a figurehead head coach that builds a culture, and then perhaps you can maybe sell that culture at a later time. But somebody to kind of help guide you through your rebuild, and then try to be like a lesser version of what a guy like Mike Vrabel is. If you want another candidate, though, that can be a culture builder for you and potentially be a long-term option, Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver is definitely a guy to watch, at least in this coaching cycle. He might not be a fit for the New Orleans Saints, but he's somebody that's going to get a job eventually. Former player, has the gusto to get everybody kind of riled up, generate buy-in, all that kind of stuff. So if I'm New Orleans and I'm looking at Matt Nagy and I'm looking at Anthony Weaver, I'm leaning a little bit more towards Anthony Weaver, even though he's on the defensive side of the football, because not only would you be able to generate that buy-in, generate that culture, and build something that's a little unique with him, you'd also get somebody that's going to bring you a really, really unique approach to your defense, which I think the Saints need a little bit of a refresh there.
Ross Jackson, I'll let you go right. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you having me on. Take care. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.